Hello, friends. Welcome to this third session of our course on the triangle of disruption. Before discussing transformative action, let's look at an artist image that illustrates the core theme of this three-part course. This image here depicts a central message for all of us. Living in a hyper-connected world, we need time, an inner moment, a space for silence and reflection. In this space, our true self, which is light, can guide us, connecting us to our deepest being. This is not a new concept, friends. For instance, in the Apocalypse, John, on the island of Patmos, is representing a similar symbol of solitude and reflection. Or Jesus, he spent 40 days fasting, undergoing an inner process in the solitude of the desert. Or for instance, in the allegory of the classic Rosicrucians, Christian Rosycross experienced a similar image. The shack where he lived on a mountaintop became a place where he was touched in solitude. Jakob Böhme, the shoemaker and philosopher from Germany from the Middle Ages, he had a similar experience in his workshop. He was touched by a ray of light that entered through a crack and illuminated a tool, and this led him to a profound understanding of the universe. And so many others share similar experiences, like Zarathustra, Lao Tzu, and so on. So this session here tries to help us to discover a deeply important space within us, not of solitude, but the inner process of changes and inner development. So it's about that the concept that are discussed here, that they become an internal experience rather than mere external theories. Next, let's consider another image, a yellow traffic light. This image symbolizes today's session on action. It signifies that precise moment of decision. Do I stop or do I move forward? This image of the yellow light is crucial, and we will revisit it at the end of this session. Why do we actually need to discuss a new and transformative form of action? As already said in our previous sessions, we live in a disruptive society where everything constantly shifts. This has profound impacts on our attention, perception, and spiritual life. Longing, self-knowledge, self-surrender, and action are not antidotes or escapes from the world's challenges, but they are tools. These tools help us to understand the disruptive processes of contemporary society. Let's now talk about attention. There's something like a new economic discipline, the attention economy. It treats human attention as a commodity or as a bargaining chip. Spontaneous actions lose their spontaneity and become algorithmic responses. The dopamine system biases our biological response to reward. Our attention becomes purely reactive rather than reflective, asking, what actions should I take? This is a consequence of modern society's impact on perception and cognition. Neuroscience indicates that this excessive exposure to stimuli significantly alters perception circuits, particularly those connecting the prefrontal cortex and brain networks responsible for deep attention. Our capacity for perception and contemplation, even of our inner selves, is being undermined by endless scrolling and screen swiping. These factors profoundly impact our self-perception, how we understand ourselves, our actions, and how we perceive external reality. We become overwhelmed by powerful impulses that hijack our attention and cognitive processes. Spiritually, it's fair to say that we face a risk of an eclipse of inner life. Our consciousness feels unbalanced, like a small boat on a rough sea. This inner spiritual understanding of what it means to be human is increasingly affected, as the constant flux of disruptive, quickly changing influences of society floods the human psyche, impacting our attention, perception, and spiritual understanding. The human soul requires space and silence. However, with the increasing attention the economy and its algorithms impose on us and therefore invade the space and silence of the soul, we need to actively strive to find room for our authentic self. This brings us to the core of this presentation today. It starts with an impulse for a transformative inner perception, urging us to question our habitual responses. Do we persist on the same path or choose a new direction? Are we merely just destined to follow ingrained patterns, our thoughts, feelings, and reactions, often reinforced by media? Or can we cultivate a new way of perceiving our consciousness, one that transcends the preconceived models? Ultimately, the question is whether we can see ourselves differently and consequently act differently. Within this disruptive structure of society, we believe it's both possible and necessary to achieve transformation. Our school aims to dismantle the detrimental life patterns through disruptive changes. We are not talking about a single change, but multiple ongoing changes. Into this framework, longing emerges as the fire that drives us to seek the truth. Everyone here, all of you, is driven by this longing. While we all have some self-perception and some self-knowledge, it may not yet have led to a profound unmasking of our inner reality. When we truly unmask ourselves, seeing who we really are, we can shift the axis of our intention and will. This leads to choices. Do I go this way or that? Following longing, self-knowledge, and self-surrender, we reach the fourth stage, action. At this critical moment, we face the yellow light decision. Do I continue with old patterns of being and acting? Or do I pause and pay attention to my actions? The key distinction here is between longing and emotion. Longing, as understood by the Golden Rosycross, is a deep, spirit-born restlessness beyond our faculties' control. Within our community of pupils and members, it becomes a collective lever for those committed to true inner change. Self-knowledge, as discussed, is an unmasking, not negatively, but as an illumination of our inner being. It offers an objective perception, free from the biases and limiting perspectives of self-perception. The third point, the second side of the triangle, is self-surrender. This is simply allowing the consciousness to operate within a space illuminated by self-knowledge. The light of self-knowledge is fueled by the fire of longing. Imagine a candle. The candle represents the longing, and its flame is the self-knowledge. The light of self-knowledge, born from the longing, the wax of the candle, enables us to perceive our environment more clearly, much like navigating a dark room without bumping into furniture. Self-surrender is the capacity to redirect our will, the driving force behind our actions. Essentially, self-surrender is the power of choice, an expression of true freedom. This allows us to differentiate our true self from the habitual garments of thinking, feeling, and acting. We understand how, even when navigating a dark room, we make micro decisions to avoid obstacles. With this analysis complete, let's define action. Friends, it's crucial to distinguish between action and reaction. Reaction is often an impulse driven by the force of habit, arising from our ingrained patterns of consciousness. Our thoughts, will, feelings, desires, and ordinary actions, even reactions, are creative forces. Through them, consciousness expresses itself, aided by self-knowledge and the ability to perceive our inner environment. This is why the image from the beginning of this session, the image of a human in an isolated space on a floating stone, is so important. It's at that precise moment of decision, when we contemplate criticism, judgment, impulsive actions, or a surrendering to creative forces that might later lead to anguish or regret, that the yellow light appears. This instantaneous perception, friends, is like instantly realizing the running of a yellow light can lead to a crash. For instance, when we are about to criticize, if self-knowledge, fueled by longing, has illuminated our inner psyche and its mechanisms, then at that moment, when the yellow light shines, preceding criticism, judgment, pride, or vanity, consciousness must align itself with the primordial force of longing. It must resist to act based solely on our emotional astral impulses. It's an instantaneous inner struggle, lasting only the fraction of a second, where we have the chance to break long-standing psychological cycles. And thus, disruptive action is distinct from repetitive action. Disruptive action is when the force of consciousness, perceiving the human ecosystem and its driving forces, leads us to immediate break or rupture. This fundamental shift frees us from our lower nature. This is disruption, an action taken in the fraction of a second. Though brief in time, this moment is eternal, as a spiritual impulse speaks within us. It's like a flash where I review my life, who I am, who I wish to be, and what my inner vices compel me to be. At this critical juncture, this moment, the impulse isn't merely to be better or appear more refined. Instead, it's to break free from habits of life, thought, and feeling. It's the moment where my deep yearning has amplified my self-perception and self-knowledge, compelling me to truly understand, wow, I can change this. This is as disruptive as the tension of navigating a yellow light. The action must be instantaneous. Ironically, friends, the uncertainty and fast pace of modern life works against this. The hijacking of attention and overstimulation erode our neural network's capacity for self-observation. Why? Because these stimuli are all external. Short videos, feeds, reels, constant pings and notifications, everything drawing our attention outward. We are discussing how to live this fast-paced life, guided by the inner spiritual impulse. It's like applying the mechanics of disruption to rebuild our inner perceptual environment. It's about liberating our consciousness, currently hijacked by a world of overwhelming excess, information overload, constant confrontation, and conflict. This action becomes possible when a human being in a spiritual school like ours embraces the path of discovering, step by step, how to identify self-longing, foster self-knowledge, strengthen self-surrender, and ultimately act in a profoundly new way. This isn't easy. It demands effort. This unique method applies to each individual, as everyone possesses their own personal triangle. We've presented this triangle of the soul, representing our thinking, feeling, and acting, our mental, emotional, and action fields. In a simplified equilateral triangle, in reality, its shape fluctuates throughout the day. Imagine if every action, thought, and reaction in life were preceded by a moment of spiritual attention, allowing us to ask, should I proceed or should I pause at this yellow light? For yellow is the signal our consciousness gives us. However, we often ignore this signal of the consciousness. Consciousness makes this yellow light more luminous. Often our conscience gives us a green light for routine actions, signaling no problem. And the red light clearly tells us to stop. The real challenge lies not in the green or red lights, but in the gray area, where life's pressures obscure and cloud our consciousness. In this gray area, we lose awareness of right and wrong, leading to mistakes because we lack an active internal space of consciousness. This is where accidents happen. Just as traffic accidents occur from disrespecting yellow lights at intersections, so do inner ones. On the internal highways connecting the three cities of our being, our centers of thinking, feeling, and action, there are countless yellow signs. Therefore, friends, remember this image. Pay attention to the yellow light of our inner connections. It is here that we will discern how we should act, provided we are supported by the propelling strength of the Spirit, illuminated by self-knowledge that reveals our true nature, sustained by self-surrender, the force of the will, which helps us to understand the intentions behind our actions and thoughts. This allows us, in that fraction of a second, to make the most challenging decision, to face our inner reality and choose whether to stop or continue. Thank you for your attention.